hour. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, leading us off. First off, Mary, let's go inside these last 24 hours. What your sources have told you about the evolution of this decision from the president, because we know that he made this decision just over the weekend here. This wasn't something he had in his mind, late last week. There was increasing pressure. He was dealing with COVID. He was on the campaign trail, came off it to recover, but very much indicated he was still in this fight. So take us through the weekend, the evolution, the private meetings, those closest to him. How did this work?
Well, David, this was the decision that the president did not want to make. For weeks, he was adamant that he wasn't going anywhere, that he was all in on fighting for a second term, that he was going to beat Donald Trump. But the political pressure, it was clear it was just going to be too much to bear. And then just over the last 24 hours, the president isolating with COVID, recuperating, huddling at his Delaware beach house with just his closest advisors, those who have been by his side for decades. And of course, his wife and family members. David, the president just alerting his staff of this 1 minute before he made it public to the world. The president ultimately saying that he had to put his personal interests aside to do what he believes is best for the party and the country that he loves so dearly. Tonight, 24 days after his disastrous performance on the debate stage, battling COVID and relentless pressure from members of his own party, President Biden finally giving in, abandoning his bid for a second term with this historic Sunday night announcement. In a letter addressed to my fellow Americans, the president writing, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interests of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." The president adding, "I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision." Then, minutes later, as the news was still setting in, the president endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris to take his place atop the Democratic ticket, calling picking her as his number 2 the best decision I ever made. Posting on social media, "Today I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this." The vice president has taken on an outsized role on the campaign trail since the debate.
Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we ready to fight for it?
Tonight, in a statement, Harris saying with this selfless and patriotic act, President Biden is doing what he has done throughout his life of service, putting the American people and our country above everything else. Saying, "I am honored to have the president's endorsement, and my intention is to earn and win this nomination. We have 107 days until Election Day. Together, we will fight, and together, we will win." It took Biden more than 3 weeks to get to this point. In the days after the debate, he was defiant.
"I am running and going to win again. I am all in. My word, I am all in."
In an interview with George Stephanopoulos, the president insisted nothing short of an act of God would get him out of the race.
And if Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and Nancy Pelosi come down and say, "We're worried that if you stay in the race, we're going to lose the House and the Senate," how will you respond?
I go into detail with them. I've spoken to all of them in detail, including Jim Clyburn. Every one of them. They all said I should stay in the race. Stay in the race. None of the people said I should leave.
But if they do?
Well, it's like, they're not going to do that.
You sure?
Well, yeah, I'm sure. Look, I mean, if the Lord Almighty came down and said, "Joe, get out of the race," I'd get out of the race. The Lord Almighty's not coming down.
But the pressure only grew. Actor and Democratic mega donor George Clooney, who had seen Biden just days before the debate, penning an op-ed in the New York Times, urging the president to drop out. Writing, "It's devastating to say it, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate." Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries told Biden to his face they were concerned he would lose the election and take Democrats down with him in November. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi did that and more. Though Biden made it clear he was firmly in the race, Pelosi going on TV, calling it still an open question.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short.
The floodgates had opened. Ultimately, 40 Democrats in Congress called on Biden to drop out of the race, urging him to do it for the party, for his legacy, for the country he loves so much.
What's on everybody's mind, is there a clear path to victory here? And can we honestly say that we're on a path to defeating Donald Trump and holding onto the Senate and holding onto the House of Representatives?
I do not think he is the best person to go into this election. I think if he is our nominee, I think we lose.
Biden fighting on, refusing to give in. But in recent days, sources telling us he was willing to listen to arguments from the other side. And then that new blow, Biden testing positive for COVID, heading home to Delaware to recuperate. And it was there, isolating the First Lady at his side, that sources tell us last night the president finally began to come to his decision. Today, he started making calls to his vice president and his closest aides. At 1:45, telling his senior advisors gathered for a call. And just 1 minute later, Biden releasing his letter to the world. Today, Pelosi calling him a patriotic American who has always put our country first and one of the most consequential presidents in American history. Pelosi sending love and gratitude to President Biden for always believing in the promise of America and giving people the opportunity to reach their fulfillment. Those words echoed tonight by former President Barack Obama, who called Biden one of America's most consequential presidents, as well as a dear friend and partner to me, and a patriot of the highest order. Obama saying it's a testament to Joe Biden's love of country and a historic example of a genuine public servant, once again putting the interests of the American people ahead of his own, that future generations of leaders will do well to follow. No mention, though, from Obama on whether Vice President Harris should now become the Democratic nominee. Two people who are getting behind Harris, Bill and Hillary Clinton. In a statement, the former president and Secretary of State calling Biden the country's North Star, saying we are honored to join the president in endorsing Vice President Harris and will do whatever we can to support her. Tonight, First Lady Jill Biden forwarding her husband's announcement with a heart. Her communications director telling us the First Lady was supportive of whatever road he chose. She's his biggest believer, champion, and always on his side. And from the president's son, Hunter, an emotional statement. For my entire life, I've looked at my dad in awe. How could he suffer so much heartache and yet give so much of whatever remained of his heart to others? He is unique in public life today in that there is no distance between Joe Biden the man and Joe Biden the public servant of the last 54 years. I'm so lucky every night I get to tell him I love him and to thank him. I ask all Americans to join me tonight in doing the same.
Deeply personal moment for the Biden family, and we all have to be mindful of that no matter where we are on the political spectrum. For our viewers at home, he's been in the public eye for many decades, Mary Bruce. This must not have been an easy decision for the president and his family, who we know were some of the people he turned to in these last few days. Sources telling you he began to come to this decision last night, and he says he'll serve out the remainder of his term. He's also indicated, Mary, that he's going to come before the American people to share more with them how he came to this decision. Do we know when?
Well, David, we are told that the president in the coming days will be coming before cameras to explain himself this remarkable decision to the American people. And this has been, I think, as you noted, a deeply painful, frustrating experience for many, not just in his family, but those closest to him, that inner circle of his advisors who have been with him throughout all of this. There is a sense tonight coming from those close to Biden, close to his family, close to this campaign, of real relief. I think seeing the pressure build on him politically, seeing him, going through all of this so publicly was really difficult. And you do have to remember that Joe Biden spent a lifetime trying to get right here, trying to get to the White House. He spent more than 50 years in public service and in politics. He was just 29 years old when he was elected to the Senate, and now he's going to leave the White House, the oldest president ever to serve. He is going to explain that decision publicly to the the American people in the coming days. For now, David, he remains isolating at his beach house in Delaware. We know he's been working the phones. We know he's reached out several times to Kamala Harris today. What a whirlwind day she must have had, and what a whirlwind this has been for the entire Biden world and the Biden family, David.
Yeah, and on that point, Mary, this was such a closely held personal decision for the president that his closest, administration officials and certainly campaign officials did not know until just before the message went out. And when it comes to the vice president, you and your team now reporting that they did speak multiple times today. Obviously, she had to be prepared for the possibility that this would be coming, but she didn't know, as far as our reporting so far, until today.
Exactly, David. She didn't know either. This difficult decision, the most difficult decision of Joe Biden's life, was made huddled with just a handful of his closest advisors over the last 24 hours. Vice President Kamala Harris learning of this today and then having multiple conversations with the president. Of course, I'm sure she has thought of this, given all of what is going on in the public conversation here. But over the last several weeks, she has been out there hitting the trail hard, showing no kind of daylight, of course, between her and the president. She has been out there championing, pushing the message of this campaign, especially reaching out to critical constituencies who they know they will need come November, especially reaching out to black voters, young black voters who polls show their support may be slipping. She's been out there hitting the top issue of abortion rights, reproductive rights, which they know will be central in this campaign. And now, David, we know she is expected to hit the trail in the coming days. But what a different set of circumstances it will be when she gets out there before voters, David.
Yeah, the scrutiny will be harsh. It's much different to be potentially at the top of the ticket, obviously, than to be the number two. But in these last couple of weeks, Mary, when this campaign was facing some very difficult days, that very tough debate performance from President Biden up against former President Donald Trump, and yet the vice president faced a very unique test in just the last couple of weeks before she faces this even larger test now ahead of her. But these last couple of weeks, knowing that this question was out there, that the polling was out there, that people were saying and asking serious questions about the president's age, about whether he should stay in this race, and she had to go out there, defend him, stand behind him, obviously not knowing if she was going to get that phone call today.
What a tremendous circumstance to be out there on the trail, fiercely defending this candidacy, adamant that the president was not going anywhere, that he was staying at the top of the ticket, all while knowing and perhaps thinking that she might be in this exact scenario, knowing that pollsters were out there asking questions, to see how she would fare at the top of the ticket against Trump. There were some polls that actually showed her faring slightly better than Joe Biden, but the entire time she was a loyal soldier, David. She was out there fighting for what is at the root of this campaign, a message that she is going to continue to make. Because, David, tonight, the Biden for President campaign is now officially the Harris for President campaign. Her campaign aides telling me they are now full steam ahead for Vice President Harris.
So Biden campaign now called the Harris campaign from this point forward.
That is the message tonight. They've actually officially filed the paperwork. They are now the Harris for President campaign. And David, just in the last few hours, we are told from small dollar donors, they have raked in over $27.5 million just in the last 5 hours since Joe Biden announced he is dropping out. Kamala Harris is already out there making fundraising appeals. And in fact, Joe Biden has also been making fundraising appeals for her, too.
All right, the breaking news right there from Mary Bruce. It is now officially the Harris campaign moving forward.